welcome to this webinar from Oktopost titled How to Use Your Personal Brand to Impact Business Strategy. I'm Colin Day. I'm the Managing Director of Oktopost Business across EMEA, and I'm joined by two esteemed guests. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Jonathan from our friends over at AppFlyer. Jonathan, I'll let you do an introduction in a minute. And Neil Murphy, my friend and colleague from Oktopost. Neil, if you could just introduce yourself after Jonathan, that would be grand. So Jonathan, look, welcome to the conversation. Thanks for joining this this webinar today. Could you just give the audience a little bit of overview and insight and color to Jonathan the man and AppFlyer the organization, and why this topic's dear to your heart?
Yeah, hi. Well, hi everyone. I'm Jonathan. I work for AppFlyer as head of thought leadership. I actually started AppFlyer deals with mobile marketing, and I come from the mobile marketing industry, which is why I was hired in the first place. A big reason for why I was hired was to help our CEO, Oren, boost his own thought leadership and his own personal brand to help the company brand. And, you know, as the story goes, I find myself doing that for Oren and for all the other employees in the company. For the past 3.5 years, I've written about 1,700 posts for about 200 of the company employees, and just helping every person in the company that wants to build his own personal brand, thus building our company brand, help them express themselves and become leaders in their own domain. So that's what I've been doing for the past 3.5 years, and that's why I'm here.
Excellent. Jonathan, I look forward to unpacking some of that across the course of the next 45 minutes. I know we're going to go into much more detail, my friend, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. Neil, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you, Colin. I'm Neil Murphy. I'm one of the account executives at Oktopost, and my role over the last couple of years has been to help mobilize organizations to share more content across social and to empower their employees, really, to help them build their own personal brands, and ultimately then tie that to business impact as they move forward. So it's all around, helping marketing teams predominantly and sales teams, not just those teams, but predominantly those teams, build confidence in themselves to kind of find, share, create content, to educate their target market, with the primary focus of being able to build confidence in both themselves and their organization. So that's a bit about me and kind of the role that I've got at Oktopost over the last couple of years.
Thanks, Neil. So look, as I said, over the course of the next 45 minutes, we want to take you on a bit of a journey of discovery, right? It's like looking at the whole topic of employee branding or personal branding, right? It's like, we'll take a little bit of a journey on what's in it for the individual, right? It's like, why focus on this in the first place? What's in it for the organization, right? It's like, we've got some great talent on the call with us today, and that's not just to big up Jonathan and Neil. It's like, if there's anyone out there in the industry that knows how to do it, it's certainly these two gentlemen, right? So, we'll be looking at some use cases as well, right? How to actually put some of this into practice and into action. There are certainly challenges, right, to doing this from a company level as well as from an individual level. We'll lean into to Jonathan and Neil across our time together to understand some of those challenges, some of the pitfalls, some of the do's and don'ts, the trials and tribulations. So if we're all sitting comfortably, let's buckle up and go on with the task in hand. So I guess, gents, the first question that would spring to mind for me, right? It's like, just to level set for the organization, and maybe level set for us, because, we may have a different understanding ourselves, but really, what is personal branding? What does it mean to each of you? If I turned around and said, hey, Jonathan, it's like, describe a personal branding strategy for me, or tell me what personal branding's like, really means. What what would spring to mind? What would come out of your thought process, sir?
So I think that when I talk to anyone about personal branding and about the people that I help write and express themselves, I usually sum it up with one sentence, one headline, which is, I want people, when you write, I want people to tell themselves, wow, that person knows his shit about X. That's it. Really, it's we can talk about how to expand it and how to do it, and you do it through communicating your personal values and strength, and basically showing, maybe not showing off, but showing your skills. But at the end of the day, all roads lead to people finding you reputable in a certain area of expertise. That's it. I want people to think Colin Day is a professional in whatever he wishes to be perceived as. That's it. That's the bottom line. A reputation like Jeff Bezos said is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And social media is all about that. You're always there, but you're never in the room. So personal branding works the best in social media.
Thanks, Jonathan. Neil, anything that you would add to that? It's like if as you're standing in front of customers talking about personal branding strategies, what do you how do you position it? How do you position those two key words, personal branding?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd echo pretty much what Jonathan said there, right? It's around kind of building confidence in yourself and identifying knowledge gaps, right? And providing consistent value to those people that you want to provide value to. So, from a personal perspective, I talk to this as, an account executive at Oktopost, and I know the kind of my target market, or the people that I want to address and build knowledge of, is, marketing executives, social media managers, and then the sales team, right? And in order to help them share content. So, from a personal perspective, what I'm looking at is, on the conversations I've had with those marketeers, with those sales teams, what are the common knowledge gaps that I can add some value in helping, or maybe some common misconceptions in the market that I can help address. And as Jonathan says, provide then, consistent value. For me, it's in the form of video, so that when people are, watching those videos or looking at my social posts, there's very little around Oktopost as an organization in those posts. And I'm sure, Jonathan would echo that with Appspire. But it's around providing value so that at the end of that video or at the end of that social post that someone's read, they can take something away that's going to help them in their day-to-day role. So that's how I personally would look at personal branding, right? It's, well, how can I provide value, give consistent value, non-product related content to help anyone in their roles be better than they were yesterday.
Great. Thanks, Neil. Thanks, Jonathan. So I heard a couple of things there. Actually, I heard quite a lot there, but some of the key things or key words and phrases that I heard, right, was confidence or building confidence. How do I help, or how do I build confidence in me, the individual, right? How do I express myself? How do I use the power of expression to, Jonathan, as you said, it's like when I'm not in the room, leave. And you use me as an example, right? So it's a bit weird that I'm talking about myself in a third party, but how does Colin Day or whoever the person is building the brand, how do they leave an impression when they're not in the room? What is it that people think about them? So thought leadership springs to mind there as well, right? And Neil, I think you mentioned value at least half a dozen times, right? It's like how do you drive value for the individual? You talked about certain media that works well for you, Neil, right? It's like video being the point in question, and I'm sure we'll dig deeper into that across the remaining times. But thanks for that, gents. So I think this diagram really sums it up for me, right? It's like when I think about personal branding, but those of you that know me know that I'm a simple guy and I love to keep things simple, right? So this little diagram here is like really it's like keeps it all succinct in so much as personal branding is really the intersection, right, or the interchange between what you think about yourself and what others think about you, or more importantly, what you want others to think about you, going back to that point that Jonathan made about you're not always in the room, and you're certainly not in the room from a social media perspective. So, gents, as we think about the value, right, of social media, as we think about the value of personal branding, right, it's like improving credibility and reputation, right? The ability to increase visibility of me, the individual, or the individual in person, right? And getting that recognition that Jonathan spoke about, being seen as maybe a thought leader or an industry leader, right, in a given topic or subject matter, right? The ability to drive more opportunities for personal growth, as well as for business growth and business success, right? All of that really comes down to, though, having better networking, right, and networking capabilities. So, Jonathan, as you think about personal branding and the strategies and experiences that you bring to your CEO and the rest of the organization, so to Owen and the team, is some of that around driving the network effect and being able to increase the networking opportunities? Is that part of what you're seeing here?
Yes, it's part, but it's not. I would say it's not. It's only part. I don't know if it's small part or big part, but it's only a part of the bigger picture. What credibility and reputation do is they just open the door for everything else, and networking is part of it. When you have a great reputation, when you're foreseen as a credible person, a credible expert, then networking options are so much easier for you. People will request, will have more network requests for you. You won't have to chase people to increase your network. And the same goes for everything else. It goes for offering partnerships. It goes for pinging people to create sales opportunities. It's easier for you to share content later on. It all starts with credibility and reputation. Now, on LinkedIn, we like to think of network as a big part of what we do. Like, I have 10,000 followers, I have 20,000 followers, which is all great. Of course, we all want to increase the network, but network is just a means towards an end. And the end goal is creating meaningful relationship that later on mature to partnerships, sales, and all the rest. So I'd like to think as reputation, credibility, and thought leadership in general as like basically, as Udi Ledergol, once the CMO of Gong, used to say, making sales easier. That's what marketing is really all about.
So Neil, that's a great segue into you, right? Making sales easier. That's what marketing is all about. That's what I just heard Jonathan say there. And look, as a sales professional yourself, what would you like to add to that one?
Yeah, look, I think what Jonathan says makes sense, right? I mean, when we look at the data and we look at, let's talk about conversion data, right? Which is where someone eventually becomes part of your marketing ecosystem, fills in a form, downloads a white paper, something like that, right? And if you look at conversion analytics when it comes to social, 90% of them come from insights articles, right? So insights, thought leadership stuff, non-product related content. And that, ties into what Jonathan's saying around building valuable relationships, right? Sending, if you are providing links through to thought leadership articles as opposed to demo requests on your website, with the end goal, not the first time that someone clicks those articles becoming part of your marketing ecosystem, but slowly maturing individuals into, understanding your value as an individual across, say, something like LinkedIn or any other social channels, to the point where they then do become part of your marketing ecosystem. But the way that I would describe personal branding is, the first the first instinct should be to provide value, knowing full well that further down the funnel, that person will eventually become part of your marketing ecosystem, right? If you were to use personal branding and trying to tie it to a business impact. So that's the way I'd see it. I'd look at it as, look, providing value first and foremost, getting credibility across your social channels to the point where this guy knows what he's talking about, as Jonathan alluded to at the beginning of the webinar. And then ultimately that will and can be tied to business success when someone does become part of your marketing ecosystem further down the line. So that's how I kind of talk about the benefits of building a personal brand, a strong personal brand anyway.
I'd like to add to what Neil said. He really explained it very well. I'd just like to add, I think that the bottom line here, and it's what founders, CEOs, and VP marketing should really understand about social media, is one very harsh truth. And I may be generalizing it, but for the sake of this webinar, I'm going to. Nobody cares about your product, and no one cares about your company. Literally no one. Most of the people that do care about your company are the employees of your company. Other than them, hardly anyone cares. So that's not the door to talking about your features, about your product. That's not the right door to open if you want to work with them. And I am just reminding both of you and everyone who's listening that you never sign deals on social media. You conduct personal meetings and Zooms, and then you meet, and then you sign and you get it through legal, and everything is done in person or through Zoom, but certainly not on social media. So social media is not a way to sign deal. Social media is the way to create opportunities for deals, and that's the right mindset for companies to keep.
Jonathan, I'd also add to that, it's an opportunity to influence deals within the cycle as well, right? So, and I don't just talk about this from a sales perspective, from a customer success perspective. If you have, meaningful relationships you want to build with your clients, you're connected with them across LinkedIn, you're going to build those relationships faster and better if you're consistently adding value across LinkedIn and across your social channels as well. So, totally agree with that. It's a great opportunity to influence, opportunities to influence individuals without directly, closing deals, through social media alone. Totally agree.
There's some great conversation there. It's like, look, the way I always talk about it is it's that first word, right? Social, when we talk about social media, right? It's like, it's about the information exchange. And I think, Neil, that talks a little bit to the value, right? That you're talking about, right? It's like, whenever, there's a conversation, you try to have some form of value exchange, right? It's like, whether it be in your personal life, it's like, me talking to my children. Yeah, and there always seems to be some kind of value exchange. It's normally me giving them the value, right? It's like, not too sure what the exchange is, but the exchange rate certainly isn't that good. But that's a topic for a different webinar, I'm sure. But look, whenever there's any form of activity going on, there needs to be a value exchange, and that's no different from social, right? And Neil, I know, when you and I talk and when you and I look at some of the statistics that we see with inside our customer base with regards to, the conversations that take place, right? People are more likely to have that conversation with an individual than they are to have with a brand, right? In actual fact, 8 times more likely to have a conversation on social with someone in their sphere of influence or someone that they see as a thought leader in their field, right? And that really comes down to an employee branding or even a personal branding perspective, right? How do I ensure that I'm that thought leader? Because if I'm able to establish myself in that way, the conversations that I have, or the more likelihood of me having a conversation when I publish something on social is is actually 8 times more likely than if it was a brand publishing content. And then, talking to that, getting that pen out on social, right? Jonathan, couldn't agree more, right? You're never going to sign a deal, well, maybe you will in times to come, who knows? But people don't sign deals on social, right? It's like, do they? But you can use social, as Neil said, as an influencer to an opportunity, or a conversation starter that could lead to the start of an opportunity. And statistically, people are 7 times more likely to take a conversion step off of a conversation that they've had with an individual on social than they are through a conversation that they've had, or a monologue that they've had with a brand. Neil, would you agree with that, or
yeah,
would you
100%
different?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it from a sales perspective, right? I mean, if I look at myself as a marketeer for a minute, right? If I was connected to 2 salespeople, 2 account executives on LinkedIn, one of them was providing consistent value, hadn't reached out to me in any regard at this point, but was providing consistent value. I was finding value from the content they're creating over a period of 3 or 4 weeks. And then they reached out to me on a one-to-one basis through Sales Navigator or called me or whatever. My propensity to take that call, my propensity to engage with that individual that knows his stuff is much higher than someone that's not doing that at all, right? So, it's absolutely going to help in that regard if you're looking at it from a personal branding perspective to help influence, a conversation with a decision maker as a salesperson. And Jonathan, I'm sure, will have different insights from sort of his role creating content on behalf of a CEO as far as how brand building's helped him. But absolutely, it's definitely a strong tie to business impact. In my case, lead generation and firming up meetings and influencing opportunities, as it is to to build my own personal brand at the same time.
I actually want to use myself as an example. So when I started working at AppsFlyer, I wasn't writing on LinkedIn at all. And after 6 months, 8 months, something like that, I figured, okay, if I'm doing it for others, I might as well do it for myself and learn how the process works, learn, how the feeling of getting a good post out of a bad post out, how does it feel? I'll learn a lot from it. And I started posting once a week about what I do. And 2, 3, 4 months later, people started contacting me on LinkedIn in a personal message, asking for consulting, asking for just one-on-ones, asking for lectures, sessions, just asking for stuff, just from me writing about the realm of thought leadership, not even writing about what I do at AppsFlyer, just writing about that topic created the perception that I am an expert in that field, which for me was magic, because those people that contacted me, they didn't really know what I was doing in AppsFlyer. They've heard about AppsFlyer, which has a good reputation on its own, but they didn't know what exactly I was doing at AppsFlyer. But me writing it was enough to create that reputation of someone who knows his shit about thought leadership. And that's really magic.
And Jonathan, on that, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, when you do start posting across social, I think a lot of people stop doing it. They'll start, they'll do it for a week or 2 weeks, and then they'll look at the, whether or not they have likes, comments, whether they have click-throughs to their website. And, quite often that isn't the most important part. I think when you look at, what happened with you at AppsFlyer there, the people that reached out to you, they may or may not have liked or commented on your post, but the likelihood is the people that reach out to me off the back of videos I push out on LinkedIn, they haven't liked the video, they haven't commented on the video, they probably watched it. Well, I know they watched it, but I don't know who that is, right? So, to give confidence to anyone that's wanting to build their own personal brand, I wouldn't necessarily be looking at the analytics that closely. I'd just be doing it, getting your name out there, trying to provide as much value as you can without paying too much attention to how many likes, how many comments, and how many clicks you had on those posts you're pushing out. Would you agree with that, Jonathan Nielsen?
I agree. I think the real analytics here is, for me, I'll give another example. One of the people that I write for, an executive in the company, one of the KPI he's using to know if a post has really resonated with his audience is the amount of CVs that candidates send him after reading his post saying, wow, I want to work for you and for this company. That's a KPI. Profile views that really spike when you have a good post, that's a really nice KPI to look at. The rest is like, it's not vanity metric, because they do mean something. They do mean some sort of direction, and they can help you navigate better and optimize your next content better. But it's not everything. And maybe we'll talk about this later on, but personal branding is always, and social media is always a long-term play. It's a marathon more than a 100 meters race or 400 meter race or even 3K race. It's really, really, really long. If you want to really see results, then, come back after a year and see if your profile gets more hits, if you got offered a job, if someone offered you to speak in a panel. That's when you know that it really resonated. But sometimes it takes 6 months, 8 months, a year, even more, to really understand if it went well or not.
Jonathan, that's some great points there, right, from you and Neil. So, just to summarize a little bit of, why personal branding for the individual and the organization, right? It's like, if I think about it from an individual perspective, right, effective personal branding requires a deep understanding of your own strengths and values. That's what we've just heard you guys really talk about, right? As well as an understanding of who the target audience is. You talked a little bit about, what are the metrics that you should maybe use in order to measure success, right? You talked about those KPIs, Jonathan. So, with careful planning and execution, personal branding can, help you as an individual achieve your personal goals and enhance your career prospects, right? It's like, Jonathan, you talked about it, about enhancing career prospects of others. Yeah, being that one of the executives that you work with, their KPI is how many extra CVs, came through the door, come through the door post, some articles or copy going out that that they're sharing and material that they're writing, or indeed you're writing on their behalf, right? So I think it's safe to say, right, that to summarize, requires you to have a deep understanding of yourself and your values. Know your audience and know what your goals and objectives are going to be in order to be able to measure and determine that success. But it's a long game rather than a short game. And I think, Neil, what you said was, what really resonated for me was consistency. Right, it's like if you're going to start off on this journey, you need to be consistent, right, with when you're creating and delivering content, right, when you're publishing content out on social, because people look for you, right? It's like people, you'll build, right, as you start to get that brand, right, you'll build a following, you'll build a group of people that will go out and look for your content if it resonates with them, if it's getting that value that Neil said. So as we move along, right, it's like we started to explore the impact, right, of personal branding, and I just want to now take some time with the gents to drive into a few other areas, right, of how do we see it compared to other aspects out there, right? It's like is it part of public relations? Is it about selling yourself? Is it about just branding yourself? It's like if we think of it from this diagram, gents, where would you really see it? And I'm not going to give you a clue because it's got a big red line around it. But is it all of these things? Is it just about branding? It's like, help me out here. Help me unpack this one.
I think when we're talking about LinkedIn, what we usually see, what we see a lot, is the personal selling section. Like, I'm great, I've been doing that, I've been doing this. Our company just released that, they just released that, a new product feature, we just got funding, we just did this, we just did that. All are great, you know. I think that's a very important point. Like, promoting yourself or the company, it's not a bad thing. What we're talking about here is impact. What we aim to drive is the highest impact. So personal selling, like, I'm great, or the company I work for is great, that's okay. There's nothing wrong about it. In terms of impact, it will always drive very weak impact. The same with advertising, which is, hidden by that red circle, is just repeating the same message over and over again, either by ads or by organic posts. We're great, we're great, we're great. There's no proof that you're great. And then we move on to PR, which is kind of more interesting because you're not saying you're great. Someone else is saying that you're great. Either it could be G2 or I don't know, Forrester or TechCrunch or any other blog or research company that said you're great, which provides some sort of social proof. But all those still won't drive the understanding of the other side that you're great. And branding happens when the other side realizes or kind of thinks subconsciously that you're a great company, that you're a great expert in what you do. And that's what the entire personal branding strategy is all about, is reaching that level.
So Jonathan, really, it's about building credibility, right? That's the great element that you spoke to there, and with a view to driving more sales, right?
Yeah.
Whatever the ultimate outcome is, right? It's like it may be financial reward from a sales perspective, right? It's like but ultimately it's that credibility in order to drive those business outcomes that Neil spoke to. It's like right at the top of the session.
I'm gonna share an example here. So one of the things that happening in our industry, in the mobile marketing industry, is the momentum that privacy and privacy regulations have on advertising and marketing, right? Everything, the data has to be private, okay? And one of the aim, one of the goals of our company, of AppsLar, is to be perceived as a privacy-centric company, okay? And so we've been doing a lot of content around thought leadership with our DPO, our data protection officer. Now, our data protection officer isn't going to sell. She's not a salesperson. She usually doesn't sit in sales meetings, and she doesn't sign the contracts. She works with R&D, she works with product, but she's not a salesperson. However, if what we're doing with her has any impact, then she becomes very well known as a privacy expert. Thus, the company, it becomes very well known as a privacy-centric company and solution provider. And then it becomes much easier for us to sell our SaaS product to companies that realize that today privacy is the first thing on their plate. That's the entire gameplay of inspiration. That's how it works.
So Jonathan, Neil, we've talked so far about the what and the why, right? It's like now let's change tack a little bit and talk about the how, right? How do we go about getting started, right? Jonathan, wondered if you can explain like some of the some of what you've done, like over at AppsFlyer, as you've been working with some of the team, whether it be Owen from a CEO perspective or other people within inside the organization. How have you got them started?
Well, that's a big question, and I'd love to hear Neil explain his take on that. But getting started is really about understanding what the other person, if you're writing for another person, is what that other person is all about in terms of expertise and passion. Okay, sometimes those collide, sometimes they don't, and you need to find a way to kind of touch both. But what you really want to grab hold of is their passion, what they love talking about, writing about, doing, working, and what their expertise in the company is. Is it customer success? Is it specific niche in customer success? Is it marketing? Is it growth marketing or product marketing or PR? Is it managing teams? Is it R&D, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? What comes later on is actually finding the right topics for them to talk about and really just preparing kind of an interview for them, just interviewing them, and really extracting those opinions, insights that each of them have about what they do, about their day-to-day work. And then later on comes the real hard work, so to speak, for me, which is writing posts from these insights. That's usually my way of working with people. But I'd love to hear Neil's take on how to trigger people to get started.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome, John. I think what Jonathan's done there is awesome, right? It's what we speak to customers about all the time is we're enabling people to share content. I think that's the key thing. It's enablement in the first instance, right? I mean, as Jonathan alluded to, you've got CEOs that want to share content, product teams want to share content, marketing teams, sales teams, CROs. Everyone wants to share content, but it's around, well, how do we enable it in the first instance? So, again, this will depend on the size of organization. If you're a smaller organization, you've got far less moving parts. It's actually a bit easier to do it. In a larger organization with people in different industry verticals, different regions, it can be a little bit more challenging. Most of the people I imagine on this webinar will be marketeers or maybe salespeople as well, looking to build their brands, or maybe even CEOs. But the first thing that I would do is I would send through a survey. So similar to Jonathan, where he talks about interviewing people, what are the people passionate about sharing? There's no point providing content to individuals, trying to enable them to share that content if they just don't care about that content in the first instance. So I try and understand a little bit around, their passions, what are they passionate around sharing? Whether that be thought leadership content, maybe it's employer branding stuff. In a perfect world, what would they want to share more of? And then I'd probably start off by running a pilot with a select few individuals that have raised their hand and say, look, I'm interested in getting involved, and put together, no more than 2 posts a week per person to initially start sharing out across LinkedIn. And then I pay some close attention to the data from there on in. So as a marketeer, I would say initially, how do you get started? You're the facilitator, right? So you're facilitating people to find and share content, to their own personal profiles. And then moving forward, what you'll find is that people will then start creating their own content a little bit more. So to begin with, it's providing a few posts for them to share or augment themselves. And then from there on in, you'll start to see people create content off their own back, and you're kind of half the way there. So that's typically how I get started. Start small with a select group of individuals, find out what those individuals are passionate about. Because if they're passionate about that content, they'll share that content, and then pay close attention to the data from there on in.
I'd like to add something. What Neil said is great, and also use the word facilitating, which I love using, but since I'm not a native English speaker, I sometimes forget. Facilitating is really the right word here. There's one very important trick that I think at that stage marketers should use when they start create program, whether it's employee advocacy or just limited thought leadership for themselves or for executives. Do not mention the company name. Just don't mention the company. That's the trick. Once you mention the company, it's very easy for everyone else, for everyone that feels kind of embarrassed. We'll talk about, challenges later on, but it's really easy to venture into the company, what the company does, what the company is. The whole trick is never mention the company. We want to create like an empty space for thought leadership. When the company gets inside that space, it contaminates the post. Forget the company, don't mention the company. Any sort of content that is created should be just clean, and the company should always stay, in the background, unmentioned. So that's a very important tip.
Jonathan, just to one point there. I mean, the interesting thing that you'll find though is that some people will then come back on that and say, well, look, we don't have the bandwidth to create all that much content, right? So just along from what Jonathan said there, as a marketer, we don't need to create all this content ourselves. We can work with product experts within the organization, with salespeople within the organization to create this thought leadership content, and with other people within the marketing team in conjunction with the C-level team. Because a lot of the time, organizations won't always have the bandwidth to create this content alone if they have a small marketing team, right? So working with those product experts to help, develop that narrative. Again, as Jonathan says, not mentioning the company name as a first instance, a first point is super, super valuable. And marketing teams shouldn't feel they need to create all of this content on their own. They can absolutely leverage experts within the organization to do that, to grow the employee advocacy sort of strategy faster than what they could if they were on their own.
That's a great point there, Neil. So just picking up on that, right? It's like, Jonathan, Neil, what advice have you got for those of us on the call that are not marketers, right? So Neil, you said that marketing teams don't need to create all that content themselves, right? But what advice would you have for those individuals that are not marketers on how they can help contribute content or create their own content? What advice have you got for those folks?
I mean, I'd be looking at things, such that we're all having conversations on a day-to-day basis, right? Whether that be with potential customers, prospects, current customers. What I'm doing is I'm looking personally at knowledge gaps that I see. And I mentioned this at the beginning of the webinar. From all the conversations I have, what are the most common misconceptions that I see from customers that I'm speaking to? It might be that, they've got 5 challenges, or they're just not sure about something in their day-to-day roles, whether that be sharing content with their employees, for instance, and things like that. And then what I'll do is I'll put together non-product related content to provide value, initiate ideas, and to give confidence, right? So that's the first thing that I'm doing to making it part of my day job, is I'm picking probably 2 or 3 things each week that I hear most commonly from my customers, and then starting to craft a narrative around that through the medium of video or social posts, not talking at all about our organization, but helping solve some of those challenges with links to interesting articles or ways to sort of solve some of the challenges that they're facing on a day-to-day. So that's personally what I'm doing from an account executive's perspective.
That's great. I just add to it like personal specific challenges that clients face on their everyday work. That's a great segue to talking about the pains of the industry, which is the reason why those executives created this company and that solution, and why customer success people are actually helping their customers overcome those challenges. I think it all goes to what we marketers call top of the funnel content, creating that awareness that there is a problem, that there is a challenge, that those challenges cost us money and businesses, and the fact that we can overcome those challenges and pains without mentioning the company. I think that's like the first line of offense, I would say, when you're trying to make your first content, your first thought leadership content. that's where you should focus on if you're not a marketer.
And gents, when we were prepping, it's like all those weeks ago, right? It's like some of the conversation that we had was really around three core topics, right? It's like making the content and the conversation personable, right? It's like relatable to the individual, right? It's like ensuring that any of the content that we create has strong backed up claims, right? And hey, explain what's going on. People like newsworthy stuff, right? People like to live in the moment, so it needs to be relevant to the here and now. Any of that changed, or is that still like what you guys believe in when you're creating that content for personal branding?
That still resonates always. I think there are so many ways and so many styles of writing and topics you could write about, but at the end of the day, if you want to create expertise in the area, in the vertical in which the company operates, then explaining what's going on, that's one of the first and I think most basic stuff you should be writing about. Usually in almost any industry, stuff's always happening. There's always something on the news. Some company bought another company. Some company had a problem. Something happened in that vertical. And if it's Oktopost, then I think it's the easiest because something is happening on social media all the time. Something is happening with Meta. Something is happening with LinkedIn, with TikTok, with Instagram. Something is always happening. And it is our kind of job as thought leader is to make that information meaningful, is to make it accessible and explain what does this mean for the average Joe, that works for a company. And when you kind of explain the news and explain what's going on and marks the benchmark for whatever is about to happen in the future, that really impacts your personal brand as an expert in your field. So that's like the most basic thought leadership content you could have. But the problem with that is that you have to respond fast. When stuff happens on the news, you can't really prepare and ask the person to write something about it in a week. You have to prepare within 24, 48 hours tops. You need to have something out, some content out about it, or it loses any sort of relevance.
Jonathan, how do you then go about tying or integrating a personal branding strategy to the overall business strategy? What have you found works? What have you found as a success over at Amplify?
Well, I hate to break the news, but I find that really aligning personal brand with business strategy is really, really challenging. And for the most part, what I really try to align is to maximize the personal brand as much as I can without considering business strategy. The business strategy comes to play when I think about which employees I want to actually empower and work for, and which ones I actually prioritize. But when I already work with someone, I don't find myself constantly thinking, okay, how do I align this content with our business strategy to do A or to do B? Because usually that gets in the way of creating authentic personal brand. So I don't think about it all the time. But when I start to think, okay, if 50% of our customers are games, then I want to work with our salespeople that sell games, that sell our solutions to game companies. I want to have a big emphasis on that. Like I mentioned, our DPO, our data protection officer, if one of our core elements is being privacy centric, then I want to work with our DPO, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But once I get working with someone, I kind of put the business strategy on the sidelines. I'm not ignoring it, but I'm not constantly thinking about how to resonate with that strategy.
Perfect. Thanks, Jonathan. Neil, look, just going into someone that here at Oktopost, like has a strong personal brand, right? It's like you are creating your own content, like you're demonstrating value to your audience. How are you doing it? What are you finding working?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to those sort of points I made earlier around, finding gaps, basically knowledge gaps, basically in the conversations I'm having on a day-to-day. But to go back to Jonathan's point on tying it to business strategy, because this is super important for me as a salesperson, right, to tie it to the business impact, really. And, when you look at organizations, ordinarily, when we're looking at trying to tie personal branding to business strategy, personal branding kind of falls into much more of a demand gen focused strategy as it would a lead gen strategy, as Jonathan says, right? We don't talk about product, we don't talk about organizations. What we are doing is trying to provide consistent value to our followers and to people that follow us on LinkedIn. And ordinarily, we're looking at this in two ways from the conversations I've had. One is, can we tie it to brand awareness? So can we start building our company's brand by building our employees' brand? And the second is from a demand gen perspective, right? So by providing consistent value across social, if we can identify who it is that engages with that content and then tie that eventually to a known record inside CRM, then we have been able to prove business impact from building personal brand across LinkedIn. So by that, I mean, if someone engages with a piece of content, a thought leadership article, let's say, for instance, and then engages with an ebook, for instance, again a thought leadership kind of article on an ebook or something like that, and then becomes part of our marketing ecosystem 3 or 4 months down the line, then we can tie what we're doing across social to business impact in that regard. But I think it has to sit with brand awareness or a demand gen focused strategy, and definitely not one to generate leads from the get-go.
Thanks, Neil. Jonathan, Neil, look, just as we start to wrap up and our time here comes to an end, can you give us some thoughts and clarity around some of the common challenges that people are going to face as they start thinking about branding strategies or personal branding strategies, and some of the solutions that you guys have brought to bear in order to overcome those hurdles and those obstacles?
I'd actually like to hear from Neil first, because I think some of the solutions that on these slides are something that I should really be thinking about. Usually, most of these common challenges, I actually tackle them on a person-to-person basis. I don't create company-wide solution to tackle those challenges. So I'd love to hear from Neil how you're tackling them, and then add my own.
Yeah, sure. Look, I mean, from a challenge perspective, it depends how many people you want to empower to share content within an organization. But I think the key thing that we always look to try and do is to bring content to individual rather than individual looking for content. And you'll find that a lot of these personal branding strategies fall flat on their face when it's too difficult for individuals to find content, be that if I send it through Slack or through Teams. So some kind of centralized place where people can easily find and share content to their own personal profiles and augment that content so that it's personable is absolutely key. The other challenge I would suggest is starting too big. Jonathan works with a select few individuals on this. I think that's absolutely the right way to go initially. If I wanted to help build the personal brand of a 500 strong sales team, it's just too difficult to do right from the get-go if you've never done it before. So I'd maybe stick with initial 5-10 people, maybe in each department, depending on how much bandwidth you have to create the content, and start with a small amount of individuals. Find out what they're interested in sharing rather than just sharing, company-led content the whole time. And then make that content super easy to edit and to find in the first instance. And if you can start to prove the model with a select few individuals within an organization, it then becomes much, much easier to grow that program when you have, you know, a cohort of individuals actively sharing content across social and augmenting that content to make it personal to their audience. So, you know, those are the key things that I'd look for, at least initially, if you were to look at rolling this out within an organization as opposed to just one or two individuals.
Neil, can I ask you, Neil, what is from that list, what is the most popular common challenge like that you face? Like, I have my own answer, I'm going to share it, but I'd first like to hear from you. Like, from all of these, there are 5 here. What is the most popular challenge that you're facing?
I feel it's the I'm not a marketer, right? Because, you know, I think historically salespeople have always relied on, rightly or wrongly, right, the marketing team to create the content, generate them leads, drive inbound inquiries. Because historically, traditionally, maybe 5 years ago, marketing was much more lead generation focused, right, around generating leads, lots of, you know, heavy spend on paid advertising with the end result of driving inbound MQLs. They were all MQL focused. Whereas, you know, I think as time's moved on, you know, marketing teams have become a lot more clued up in that they know that the best way to generate leads is through a demand gen focused strategy where they're providing content, valuable content, to the point someone becomes organically part of the marketing ecosystem. And I think there's a lot that sales can take from marketeers in that regard, and start to think about how they can too generate the type of content that generates demand as opposed to leads. So I think that's the key one. That's a big challenge that marketeers have.
And Jonathan, I'm going to interject there, because I think that last one is actually a combination of all of the above. I think that was the everything above equals I'm not a marketer.
So you may be right, but here's the interesting part. Like for me, maybe since I'm a marketer working for a marketing department and the marketing company, the I'm not a marketer challenge is the least common challenge that I face. Really the least one. And also for me, the easiest to solve. When someone tells me I'm not a marketer, I'm saying, great, I'm a marketer. You know, let me help you write. Let me help you do that. For me, usually, like the most common is actually the first one, is that feeling of embarrassment, that cringe that people feel like, should I be promoting myself? That's really not me. Why should I? Like, who am I to promote myself? This is, and this actually, this for me includes all the rest. Is not knowing what to say. It's been written before. I don't know how to write effectively. That actually is all included in that cringiness that people feel when they're posting. And for me, I think that's the hardest challenge to cross, because it's super personal. It's super personal, and people need to feel, in the end of the day, when they do that, like often in a consistent way, they need to feel comfortable. If they don't feel comfortable, they're not going to do it long term. So for me, that's the most common challenge, and it takes a lot of work to like unravel that challenge and make people feel comfortable and in their own element, and helping them writing something in their own style really helps, and helping and writing about their own passion really helps to lower down those barriers. But I find it really interesting that you're actually seeing other challenges that are much more popular than that.
And Jonathan, Neil, on that note, thank you so much for your time. It's been an amazing conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, Jonathan, Neil, that is the end of our time today. Thank you for joining the conversation.
Thank you.
Cheers, John. Thanks.
Cheers.